Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we're going to work on another one of these reels. It was a 70s reel made in Japan to compete against the Mitchell 300. This is the Zebco XRL 40. Very much similar in a lot of regards to the Mitchell. We'll take a look at this. We'll show you some comparisons to it. We'll show you how it works and clean it up. So there's a subset of my viewers out there that like to see these old reels and these old technologies. So when I'm out and about looking for reels, in addition to just servicing the ones my customers bring in, I always keep an eye out to see what's on folks' tables at flea markets or garage sales. And if one of these shows up, then I generally will pay a couple of dollars for it, take it home, and see what makes it work. So this one was certainly under $10. And this reel is made in Japan, and probably a 30 size, 25 or 30 size reel. And I've talked about this previously, but if you haven't seen my videos, when you're buying a reel from a garage sale or a flea market or that, make sure all of the features and functions work. Particularly on the older reels, unless of course you're buying it as a parts reel, you want to make sure that the bail works, that this trips easily, that the spool goes up and down. If it has an anti-reverse override, that works so that you can backpedal the reel. If it has the handles and everything, you want to make sure that the knobs and everything are correct and that they're spinning. And you also want to make sure on the reel seat that there are no chips or cracks or broken pieces and parts on that. So if that's the case, then you know most of the time you just have a cleanup project in front of you and you can put it out for some pretty quick servicing. So let's go ahead and do that then. So mimicking the Mitchell 300, it has a push button spool that just releases off of that. And we're going to take the reel apart completely so we can show you how that works. And when I take pieces and parts off, I put them into a parts tray. It's nothing fancy. It's the bottom, I believe that's the bottom of a vinegar bottle. But you can use milk jugs, or you can go out and get a commercially available parts tray as well. This one has a through handle, and you can identify that because there is a screw on this side which holds the post of the handle. If it didn't have that screw there, then you would be looking at a handle that screws in and out of the main gear. But in this case, it has that little hold that will enable you to pull it out. And this is a reversible handle, so if you wanted to, you can make this a right-hand crank versus a left-hand crank. In this case, this was set up as a right-hand crank. I'll leave it that way. So now we've taken that apart, we can go and do the bottom. We'll take that off. There's 3 side plate screws, and they're set up for either a Phillips head or a flat-bladed screwdriver. And I'm going to get it started with the flat-bladed one, and then I'll probably switch over to the Phillips head just because it's a little bit easier. So when you take these out, make sure that all 3 of the screws are the same. There are manufacturers out there that do put different screw lengths in different parts of the side plate, usually for clearance reasons. They may have an indentation in their gearing. They may have something going on in the side plate design, and that would call for a longer or a shorter screw. And if that's the case, you just want to note where the shorter or the longer screw comes from, so that when you go to reassemble, you put it in properly. In this case, those 3 screws appear to be the same. And once I verified that, I don't know if you can see it on my board, but I verified that this way, then I'm going to go put that in the parts tray as well. So all I expect to see in this reel now is cleanup. So we're going to take that side plate off, and we've got a very clean reel here. What we don't have is lubrication. So this reel has probably been sitting for quite some time now, and it's probably just gotten dusty and dirty, and we'll go ahead and do it. This one has a spool shaft that is actually held in with a pin, and this pin rides in the channel here to keep the spool shaft functioning as it goes up and down. Another thing I like to see in this reel, this is a pretty quality reel for the time. It has a brass bushing in it rather than a plastic bushing that comes in some of the newer reels that are lower end. So we're going to go ahead and pull this pin out here, it simply should just pull out as it did. When you pull the pin out, notice which side came out from where. So the longer side here in this pin goes through the shaft. The shorter side of the pin goes into the groove in that side plate to ride up and down. Very easy to try and do it backwards. It will sit. And of course you won't get the side plate on if you put it in that way. So you need to take notes along the way. One of the things that I encourage the folks that follow my videos is to make sure that as you go ahead and do these things that you take pictures along the way so that you have the reference points for this, and that you know how to go back and reassemble the reel, what pieces came from where, and how to make this work going forward. I'm having a little trouble gripping the shaft to pull out. There we go, we got it out. So one of the things we probably have behind here is dried grease from this thing sitting for as long as it did. You need to pull the shaft out before you can pull the main gear out, and that's because you have a double drive on this. Yeah, there we go. We had a whole bunch of old coagulated grease in here, so we'll take care of that. I use cotton swabs to get old grease like this off. If it's really coagulated, you can go back to your screwdriver, use that as a scraper, take the grease off that way. If it's really bad, you can go ahead and use a grease dissolver like a WD-40. That'll also help you along the way. But you want to clean that old grease off of there, because you want to make sure that as you reinstall that if there's any contamination in that grease, dirt, sand, grit, whatever, that it's off of there, because that won't allow you to operate this reel effectively and efficiently. Okay, so I took that, and just to show you, I'm going to use that WD-40. I'm just going to hit it with a squirt here. That'll help loosen it up. Again, a cotton swab, and it doesn't take much in terms of elbow grease. If this was an issue, you could go to a steel wool or a kitchen scrubby pad or something that has a little bit more abrasive on it to help you. So here's why you couldn't pull that shaft out without, or pull the gear out without the shaft. That shaft rides between the two gears here. This one's for the crosswind block that makes the spool go up and down. This is the main gear that turns the rotor on the reel, and this sits in between, so you can't pull it out when it's fully assembled. All right, we're going to just check the teeth here, and all of the teeth appear to be in good condition. Check the teeth on the back so to make sure that the crosswind gear is okay. And we're going to move over to the crosswind block and gear itself. We'll go ahead and take that off now. Again, noticing which way it came out. It came out this way, so you know that the tail of this is headed downwards. And on this case, you just want to make sure it's clean, just like the other pieces. And you want to make sure that there's no cracks or broken pieces and parts there. And there's a little groove that gets some lubrication, and this one has some old lubrication in it, so we'll take that out while we're at it. And we'll just turn our attention up here to the rotor and that assembly. That assembly is held on by a 12mm nut. I'm going to go ahead and use a ratchet to get this one because it's sitting a little deep. Just a quick turn there. And I want to get under there just to make sure I lubricate the reel so that it's optimally working. So that's just a quick turn. And I'm going to lay that piece and part right on my workbench here, because all I want to do is just make sure it's clean. Now if I had to pull this pinion gear out, that's why you would remove the rotor. You'd take the 3 of these set screws out, and that would enable you to pull the pinion gear. But there's nothing in here of any consequence, so I'm just going to put a dab of reel oil on there. I use a Reel X oil, which is designed for fishing reels. And just make sure whatever oils you're using as you go to lubricate your fishing reel, it's that it's designed for fishing reels. Too many times I see stuff that maybe is appropriate for the automotive industry or general purpose things like 3-in-1 oils and that. And not to say they're bad oils, but you will do better with fishing reels with oils that are designed for fishing reels and greases that are designed for fishing reels, because they have the right amount of petroleum properties to ensure that you have the waterproof or water tightening capabilities, and you also have properties that enable you to stop the evaporation or limit the evaporation and drying out and so on. So with that, there's just a little bit of some coagulated grease and junk on the back here. My guess is from looking at this that this was probably a fresh water usage. I'm not seeing any greening, salt corrosion, things like that. That would make this a, would indicate to me that this was heavily used in salt water. Although here on the Atlantic seaboard, anything's possible in terms of where these reels are being used. So I like what I see here. We're just going to go ahead now and use some of those greases that I was talking about. This happens to be a Penn Precision reel grease. I call it blue grease. It's, this one works fine. I'm happy with it, so I use it. Again, anybody's reel grease, any manufacturer's reel grease, any third party's reel grease, any of those products that are out there in the marketplace designed for fishing reels is the best product to be used when you're servicing fishing reels. And in this case, I just use a Penn, although others clearly will work fine. I'm going to take a little bit of that and put that on the crosswind block as well. I'm also going to throw a little bit of oil onto the hub of that crosswind block just to make sure it spins well. And then I can go ahead and put the crosswind holder on. And now we're just kind of getting into reassembly now. So that rides on the two rails here. We then know that we have to put the main gear in. We've already checked the main gear for teeth. We found out that that's fine. We cleaned up some of the old grease, so it's time to put some new grease on there. And you don't have to overload. Just make sure that you have enough that it'll ride smoothly. You want to make sure that you put some on both the crosswind gear on the back here and the main drive on the other gear, even though we have the pinion gear up top lubricated, and they'll all work their way in over time. The other thing I like to do when I reset this is to bring this assembly all the way down low so that it's easy to work on that shaft and putting the pin back in. So with that lube, we're going to go ahead and reset that. And now I can put the shaft in, but before I put that shaft in, we noticed that there was some dried grease on it, so I'm just going to go to a piece of steel wool just to clean that off. And then when I get through with this, I'm going to put a drop of oil into the shaft gear itself to finish that lubrication process. Notice the orientation of the hole. We want to put the shaft in, and we want to line that hole up with the carrier hole below. Hopefully we're seeing this on the video here. There we go. And you can use a pin. This is a small awl. You can use other things just to make sure that you have that properly aligned. And then go grab the pin that we pulled out. And remember, there's a long side and a short side on this. The long side is what's going to go in. And then we can reassemble. We're going to put a little bit of blue grease onto the bushing. And then here's a little tip as well. When you go in and do the side plate reassemble, this is the anti-reverse dog ratchet. And you want to make sure as we do this that the ratchet is set low so that it doesn't interfere when you go to reinstall the back plate here. Okay, so we're in good stead there. This one gets wrapped up. There's a little bit of a spring that needs to be reset here. Okay, we have the anti-reverse gear off, and then that's easy to slide in then. And then you can trip it, and if you put your 3 side plate screws in, you can trip that back. Alright, we know that the 3 side plate screws are the same, so it doesn't matter what hole they go in. We know that this is a flat blade or a Phillips head. I finished it off with the Phillips head. This is a good point to say, you know, some folks ask about the mechanical screwdrivers, battery operated ones. I generally do not use them. I enjoy working with my hands. I do understand that there's folks out there that do have some issues with their hands, whether it's arthritis or hand strength or whatever, and need to use something like that. I would tell you go ahead and use it, but don't finish off the tightening of the screws with that screwdriver, because you can warp the side plates or break the side plates. And if that's the case, a reel like this, you're not going to find the side plate, and the reel will pretty much be done at that point. So go ahead and use that, but don't, you know, the last turn or two, use your hands if you can. If you can't, really reduce down the torque on that, just to make sure that you're all set there. Okay, I'm reversing this. Most of my customers like to use a left-hand drive on a spin reel, so I'm reversing the handle. The handle was set up as a right-hand drive, but it's interchangeable on this reel, so we can do either. And then I'm tightening this down. And then we'll just give it a test spin before we go up top. And we've got a nice operating reel, and as I said before, I'm just going to put a drop now of the oil onto the shaft where it meets the pinion gear, and we'll just give that a crank or two as we go through that. All right, last part on this one then is the drag system. We just want to take an inspection of it. This is metal drags, if I remember correctly. It's been a while on this type of a reel. The metal drag system is identical, pretty much, at least in concept, it's identical to the Mitchell 300. It's a pressure spring that forces the metal down, which puts drag pressure onto the reel. And it's held in place by a channel lock spring, which this one is very strong. I'm trying to, there we go. And it is a spring, so you got to hold it like I'm holding it here so it doesn't fly. And that's a heavy-duty spring there. And we're just going to do an inspection of this. It should just come right out. There we go. So what I like to layer them out as I take these out. So there's your drag washer on the bottom. This is nice and clean. It appears to be a Teflon or a plastic or whatever was appropriate in the 70s. That's going to be followed by the first of the metal washers, then the tension spring. And what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that there's no broken parts, but more importantly, I'm making sure that these are clean. If these were used in the ocean, you would probably see an accumulation of salt buildup in the water there. I got that last one on backwards. If you see that clean, you have to clean it up and make sure that there's no impediments in there that's going to cause the reel to not function properly. As I mentioned, this is a heavy-duty spring. It takes a lot to compress this, and sometimes you can just do it on hand strength, but most of the time you need some assist. There's a channel groove that this rides in below the deck of the spool here, and I'm just going to try and get it started. If I can't do it with that, I'm going to use a needle nose pliers to help me along the way. And I think that's probably what's going to need to be done here. Okay, so I'm going to get that set. And I'm going to go to a needle nose pliers here. And again, I'm holding that spring because if it shoots, we're going to be spending some time on the workbench or the floor or wherever else it may be, trying to figure out where it went. So this one's got a lot of tension in it. That's interesting. Most of the ones today have a lot less in terms of the wire itself, but regardless, there we go. I heard a click that time. All right, so we're back in with the spool. You can hear the drag clicker when it's letting out line. I'm going to go put that back on. And all we have to do now is just tighten down the drag nut, and this we'll probably clean it up a little bit later. But the purpose of this video is all about the mechanicals and showing you the reel itself, and not about the cosmetics, as I don't have a lot of time on these videos to do the complete reel cleaning. With that, I'm just going to throw a drop of grease on each side of the bail, just to make sure that that rides nice. If this was all crudded up here with the bail, if there was a problem with the operation, if it was sticking, then we would go ahead and take the bail off. But this is one of those things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. These bails have springs in them. If you lose the spring, break the spring, you're probably out to $5 or $10 that you paid for the reel. So with that, this is a 70s reel. It's nice technology. This one's solid. It's got brass bushings, which was nice to see in it. It has strong gears in it. It has the typical Mitchell type of an setup up top there with the removable spool with the button and with the metal drags in between. This reel is ready to go fishing again. And if you find one of these out there and you're curious about how these things work, go ahead and take it apart. Like I said, if most of the time I say these things break, if you find out that there's a broken piece and part inside of it, well, then the money you spent to acquire the reel is what I call the cost of tuition. It's just it's a small price to pay to learn about how the reels were put together, to observe the technologies, and to help you as you continue to take this on as a hobby or a project or a business. So with that, I'm going to thank you for watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you liked it, please indicate that on YouTube. If you want to see more, please subscribe, as I post frequently. Thank you for viewing.